Well, first, I'd like to thank Maria for her awesome conversation with us today and discussion. Thank you very much. I think I was most struck by her last comment, her last quote. And that was just so powerful to learn to see ourselves in those that are most different from us. And I think that that's so important for all of us to look within ourselves and find those opportunities to be able to see ourselves in everyone, which means get beyond our differences and find the unity in our purpose here as humans. And I think also I was struck by her quote, there are no illegal humans. There was just such a humanity to her discussion today and about the work that we do around race equity and the importance of looking at our shared humanity. It's just so powerful. And then just finally, the stories that she told with both humor and the reality of what it is in our humanness, the rawness of being human and our experience together. It just isn't that different when we can really look at it and examine ourselves. So it's so important for us to be able to capture those stories, and within that, see ourselves in other people's stories and realize our humanity. So I think that's what I was most struck by.
Well, I want to thank you as well for telling such an amazing, amazing story. I'm jealous a little bit. And I also want to thank you for allowing me to be on this panel with two distinguished of students. So I feel that. You're right. It does. It's a very distinct feeling of being a student here, with the university. And that's what resonated me with. It made me reflect back to that moment of like when I first walked through the door and not seeing me look back. So
I just want to say that for the first time, I have a new television series coming up on PBS, which is the first time that a news program on PBS, or actually in any time, is executive produced and anchored by a Latina journalist, and it's telling the stories of our new America. And I spent some time in North Dakota in Fort Berthold in the 3 affiliated tribes. And I came away from that saying, if I was president, which I'm not going to be, but if I was, I would make it mandatory for every single person living in our country to spend this amount of time on a reservation. Because those are our founding fathers and founding mothers, and we need to acknowledge it. So it's one of the most moving reporting experiences that I have ever had, and I've had many, was to be on our native land. So I honor you and thank you for being here. Don't give up.
I won't.
You're doing great. Well, thank you, Maria. I thought it was really moving. And one of the things that struck me about it is that the situation in the world that I heard Maria describing was not one in which we have a majority of people who, in a very benign way, do everything possible to have the rest of the people catch up. That's a frame that is never going to work as we talk about what we would call the quote-unquote achievement gap. The reality of the situation is very different. We're at a tipping point in this community where we literally cannot continue to thrive unless every part of this population is as absolutely productive as can possibly be. And the frame is a much more multicultural one in which the language skills, the cultural skills of families that have come here from Mexico, from Somalia, from Southeast Asia, feed into a pool of talent that makes us much more of a global powerhouse. That's the reason I left being mayor and jumped into this work, because I see this phenomenal potential. We're at a tipping point in which we literally cannot thrive as a community anymore unless we change the frame. And we're at a tipping point in which there are enough people in rooms like this and many other rooms who get this. Now the point is we've got to map out the specific action plan that we're doing. That's what I'm doing at Generation Next. And I think the bridge between what you're saying and what those of us on the ground are needing to do is to say, okay, we get it. Now what are the 5 things we need to do right away?
So we're in a conference in a place where our goal is to leave here with action steps. And I know just sitting at the table here, we were kind of laughing and giggling, but then making some dreams as we responded to the things that you were saying. And I'm wondering if in the talk you were able to connect with some actions that you're taking that we could help with, and you're going to hear from us too. They're going to hear from us too. But what are some things that came to your mind to think of, oh, there's some things that we could do around that, or if it kicked off something that you're already doing that could be some points to coalesce around for action?
Okay, sure. I mentioned that there's a tipping point of concern on this. My organization, Generation Next, is a coalition of some of the largest foundations and businesses in the community that have charged me to help us lead through what are those specific steps. Step one was to hire a great policy person in Victor Cedeno, but step two is to recognize that that can't be done unless there's a dramatically increased engagement from people who are on the ground doing this work. So we're also setting up, I'm going to do a commercial for my next hire, which is a director of outreach and communications, who needs to be somebody who's deeply embedded on the ground doing this work. We're hiring, we need that. One of the things that's a challenge here is that I have heard so many people say in this community, everybody knows what works. Well, everybody says that, but everybody doesn't agree on what that is. I'll be really clear about that. So what we need to do is put aside this really polluted discussion about teachers' unions don't want to do good things, they don't want to reform things. Put away this thing that somehow somebody who works for a foundation at a company is a quote-unquote corporate reformer. That polluted discussion is a lot of crap, and we have to set it aside because we need all hands on deck right now, really aggressively. We're charged with 5 key goals. Number one is develop a really clear, clean metric on what does it mean to be ready for K. We need to thank Commissioner Casilius and the people of the legislature and the governor for doing a lot to help our early childhood system, but we also need to support the work that's done in the Promise neighborhood, in the Northside Achievement Zone, and many other places to engage those parents. We're diving right now into our second goal, which is really about the issue of every kid mastering reading by 3rd grade. No excuses, no exceptions. Not reading in 3rd grade, mastering it in 3rd grade, because if they don't, they are never going to get the rest going. The way we're going to do that is to use as much data as we can to hold up promising practices. What schools are working, what teachers are working, what out-of-school strategies are working. The third is going to be around 8th grade math. There's terrific work going on in STEM in this community, but we really have to make sure every kid does that. We need scads of engineers, and they're not going to be an engineer unless they master algebra in 8th grade. We're focused fourth on the issue of high school graduation. That was the place I spent most of my work as mayor. We put 18,000 kids, 80% kids of color, through our Step Up Summer Job program. We graduated in this room, and this room I saw year after year after year the future of that, but we've got to have more like that. And finally, the issue of getting kids through college. Dean Quam is over here. She is one of the true heroes of what's going on here at the university, and she and President Kaler have been doing an enormous amount. President Kaler just came in with a huge new initiative about taking those kids in their first year at this university and not having the obscene drop-off we have, and really focus to get them through 4. The final point is we've got to put that through a frame that recognizes there's some social and cultural, social and emotional factors that are engaged in that. We're especially focused on resilience and grit in 7th grade. I could go on at length about that, but that's my challenge.
Want me to go ahead? Well, my entire job is race equity and excellence in education. We changed our mission at the Department of Education to leading with educational equity and excellence every day for everyone. And it wasn't just for kids, it's for adults as well, leading with our teachers, leading with our communities, leading with our parents, leading with our children, and making sure that we set that as a #1 priority, and every lens and every decision that we make comes through that mission. So that's first and foremost. So this is, I wake up in the morning, how am I going to make a difference? And I go to bed and assess, how did I make a difference? And one thing we did this week was get free lunch to all kids. So that was So it's being able to step up and champion when action is right in front of you, when you know you're not doing good enough, and being able then to work through that and just get it done for kids and for families. That's one, being a champion. I think also being a role model and making sure that at the highest level, my executive team and the people that I work with reflect the diversity of the community. So that is absolutely an essential piece, is that I'm constantly looking for and trying to recruit people who look like me and look like all of you and look like all of Minnesota as part of the leadership team that drives education in our community. And simply put, I have to be the champion for education and the voice of education with the governor and set a strong policy agenda forward that has an equity and a race equity mission to it. We committed to this in 2011, 3 years ago, and we are seeing strong progress toward results of closing gaps right now. And my job is to make sure that our district superintendents and our district school boards and our teachers have the information they need to keep their eye on the prize for every single kid. And just yesterday, we released a report on how well we're doing to closing achievement gaps between kids of color and white students with other white students by 2017. And I'm happy to report that about 65% of our districts are on track with all students or missing one subgroup of students in mathematics, or 75% of our districts are on track for closing that achievement gap by 50% in 3 years, of missing in reading by all students or just missing one subgroup. So this is doable, and it's going to take all of us, and all of that data is right on the website. So you can help me by going and looking at that data, looking up your district and seeing what subgroups they meet, and helping be part of this change and making sure that the eyes is on the prize for every single one of our kids.
Well, I wasn't in the breakout sessions with you guys, but I can take it from another perspective of a person that's actually going through it.
Yeah, please.
And what worked, and what got me to where I am today. And the only thing I see is, from my perspective, and I'm not sure what President Keeler has in mind for the one-year plan, but from my perspective as a Native American, and I noticed, and I appreciate the way you listed that up there as us as a distinct group, because we are. We have a very distinct political status apart from the other races. We are still part of the minority group, but we have a very distinct view. From my perspective, though, here at the University of Minnesota, I wonder. Like, I look through, and like I said, the statistic of our race being small, with a small population of the University of Minnesota students, I'm wondering how are we recruiting people? What are we offering? Why would they choose this place? And I come back to the same idea, and we have this multicultural center here at the University of Minnesota. And they created this homogenized box to throw every single person of color into, is what it appears to be. There's no distinction between a Native American student, an African American student, Asian American student, a female for that matter. I mean, it seems like they threw us into this box and created a us and a them. So as a minority student here at the University of Minnesota, you walk in, you're brown, the Multicultural Center's over there. So, I guess, is that reflective of the retention rate here at the University of Minnesota? Where are the students in the second year? You were talking about students past 1 year here at the University of Minnesota and reaching out to them. When you're thrown into a homogenized box, are you really reaching out to them? Or are you just saying, thank you for your first year, I hope you come back for the second? And that's my perspective.
Very powerful.
So, you all here.
Would you mind if I just made a quick comment on, I thought that was an incredibly powerful statement, and it's really clear that we have to recognize the fact that this idea of communities of color is a convenient shorthand that absolutely does not allow us to take the specific actions, interventions, and harvest the perspectives that we need. I can say, actually, on the ground, there are some pretty good examples of what's building that pipeline back behind it. Some of the work being done in education at Little Earth United Tribes in Minneapolis has been really powerful, but I think one of the things I take out of your comment is the idea that there have to be far more direct outreach and retention points. One of those, just as you begin to do what our group does a lot, which is hone the data as much as possible and disaggregate it. Very often when you get into data about American Indian populations, the numbers are small enough that it's often put into an other, which sends this horrendous message that somehow it's an other. I can't imagine that we can't find better ways to do that. And I think along with the parts that you're talking about, that's one very specific thing we need to get on.
Do you mind if, well, and especially for a city like Minneapolis that has one of the highest populations of Native Americans and Native American people. Like, why is the University of Minnesota, which is a public college and a land-grant college, you know, you start thinking back, like who, where did this land grant come from? Who are the originators of this land? You know, does the university...
That's
So
how you change the narrative, right? That's how you change the narrative, is you
exactly.
just take a question and you pose it in a way that makes you, I don't know if any of you have seen this poster, but it's actually of a Native American, you know, holding, and underneath the Native American, he says to the pilgrim, who's the illegal alien? To the pilgrim.
But it's the originators of this land. I mean, I feel like the University of Minnesota has a special responsibility to help educate the population, the Native American population here. So, and then when you look at the numbers of students that are Native American, I mean, like you said, what are we doing to reach out to those communities? I mean, what are we doing to reach out to the schools to bring those students here?
Right.
What are we offering them to come here?
You know, it resonates with me what you said, Maria, about changing the use of language that we often look over or overlook, and it's so important. As we wrap up here, I hear him saying what you said in a very different, in a similar vein. No, there is no illegal humans, and there is no human that is statistically insignificant. None. And so to walk forward with those things that we pull out of what we hear and what we gather today is going to be important. As you go to your next session, I want you to think about pulling out and extrapolating these things. We've got to hear our educational leaders talk about that and pull some of that out for themselves. What are you going to pull, not just from your sessions, not just from what you heard here, not just from this rich dialogue here, but what are you going to pull to inform your action and your change of language going forward? What are you going to do?